I initiated the divorce proceedings, deeming a financially struggling spouse to be of little value. My world was shaken when, during a business trip, my husband abruptly declared not only his intent to divorce, but also his simultaneous marriage to his lover. To add insult to injury, he accused me of marrying him solely for his wealth and demanded I forfeit any claims to our property. Confronting my indifferent husband, who had always treated me with disdain since our marriage, led to his unraveling and a downward spiral to rock bottom. I am Karen, 35 years old, raised by a single mother since my father's passing in kindergarten. Despite the financial challenges, we found happiness as a family of 3. Even as an adult with a decent salary, my frugal habits persisted from childhood. I married John, a wealthy man I met through an acquaintance, drawn to his kindness and the new world he presented. Our differing views on money and gender roles emerged after marriage. While John envisioned a traditional household, I was dedicated to my career and financial independence. Before marriage, John suggested I become a homemaker, assuming I would embrace traditional domestic roles. However, I expressed my desire to continue working until we had children, emphasizing the financial benefits. Although I managed to convince him, the reality of balancing work and household chores proved challenging. Despite being a full-time employee, my days were consumed with domestic responsibilities, leaving little time for us as a couple. In contrast, John, adopting a traditional husband role, contributed nothing to household tasks. While he witnessed my busy schedule, he simply indulged in dinner and relaxation upon returning home. Balancing work and domestic responsibilities took a toll on our relationship, prompting me to question if this was the essence of a marriage. Despite my efforts, I hesitated to voice my dissatisfaction, fearing he might insist I quit my job despite his lack of contribution at home. I had hoped that the arrival of children would bring about a positive change in our relationship. Unfortunately, our connection had grown distant, casting doubt on the possibility of expanding our family. Feeling the urgency to discuss this matter, I approached John. "Hey, we should start considering having kids, right?" "Huh? Kids? You're quite energetic, considering you're tired from work and chores." "It's not about that. I want to have children. We haven't been married that long, but I'm already over 30. Women have a limited time to have children, and it's getting harder for me to conceive as I get older. It's almost too late. But we don't need kids. If we have one, you'll expect me to help, right? You know I'm busy with work, and I won't help with child rearing." Declaring you won't help with child rearing even before they're born is strange, isn't it? I plan to raise them alone, but shouldn't you at least have the intention to help? It's your child too. Child rearing is your job. I'm working to support the family, so I definitely won't help with the kids. You'll just complain that I don't help, making me the bad guy. You must have been indoctrinated with poverty and lots of kids since birth. We're not poor. We don't need kids. End of discussion. John abruptly ended the conversation, retreating to his room. Alone in the living room, tears overwhelmed me. My desire for children was not only rejected, but my upbringing was also mocked. Following this incident, our relationship deteriorated rapidly. Communication became scarce, and the possibility of having children seemed more distant. As I continued to juggle work and home responsibilities, taking on significant projects at work, I found myself increasingly distant from John. One day, when informing him about an upcoming business trip, his unexpected kindness surprised me. He wished me well and hinted at a big surprise upon my return. Despite having given up on him, his smile shook my resolve. However, my faint hope was shattered upon returning home. The front door wouldn't open, and John revealed the first surprise. He had changed the locks. The second surprise was the announcement of our divorce. He claimed to have forged my signature and submitted the papers with a friend as a witness. Inside, he presented a document for me to sign, waiving my rights to property division. Protesting the false accusations, I insisted on a mutual renunciation of property rights, intending to make it a public document. John, stubbornly retorting, redid the document on his computer, initiating a tense exchange. As I left the house, he continued to scorn me for being poor, even contemplating discarding my belongings. A few days later, John, in a state of panic, called me, wondering what I had done. "What do you mean I haven't done anything? Why are you panicking? I have a lot of questions. First, I was told to leave the apartment." "Oh, you were still living there. That's not allowed. It's a new month. You're trespassing." "Trespassing? But it's my house. Are you okay? Did you forget that it was a company apartment I rented? I was the leaseholder, so naturally, you can't live there anymore." "That's ridiculous. How could you do this? I can't believe you didn't know. I'm not the one who should be accused of doing things on my own. Didn't I tell you that you can't just change the locks of a rental apartment? It's my house. I can change the locks if I want. Didn't you listen? It was my leased apartment. Even if you were the leaseholder, the owner is the apartment manager. You can't change the locks without informing them." "Is that so? Also, I terminated the lease while you changed the locks. I was allowed to live there until this month. I was planning to return, but now you've unlawfully altered someone else's property, which could be criminal damage. Wait, why did you terminate it so early?" "Criminal damage? Is that why the police are at the front door now? I'm too scared to open it." But I calmly replied, "So the police did come. Don't worry, it's probably not for trespassing or criminal damage. It's better to talk to them." "Why do I know about the police?" "Because I reported you for filing the divorce papers yourself. It seems like you've committed crimes like forgery and fraudulent use of a private document. Divorce papers can be filed by one person, but only with mutual agreement and personal signatures. Since John forged my signature and the witness, it's obvious that it's a crime." But he seemed unaware of his guilt. I continued pressing further. "So the divorce papers you submitted are invalid, and your marriage with Susan can't happen either." "How do you know about Susan? Did you think I knew nothing? I had a private detective agency thoroughly investigate your affair with Susan. It was a busy time at work, and coordinating with the agency was tough. Plus, you even held a grand wedding ceremony while I was supposedly on a business trip. Are you okay? Your business trip was a lie." "Yes, I took leave from work, despite being busy, to do some research and prepare documents. I knew about you bringing Susan home. It would have been impossible to gather this evidence while working." After I revealed everything, John was speechless and seemed quite downcast even over the phone. Then he pleaded with me, "Please don't tell Susan I'm divorced." "Why would I? There's no such fact to tell." "Really? Thank you. Are you misunderstanding something? When did you become divorced? That fake divorce paper is invalid, remember? So legally, you're still my husband, not divorced." "What? So since you committed adultery, well, legally, my husband, Susan needs to pay compensation. I sent the demand for reparation to her house yesterday by express delivery. She didn't know you were married, right? Then I can't withdraw the claim at this point. I already knew Susan believed John was single, but I deliberately sent the reparation demand. Susan hasn't contacted me yet, so maybe she hasn't received the letter. It should arrive soon. Should you be on the phone with me when you also have to deal with the police? You're busy? I'll ignore the police. I won't be arrested. I'm going to Susan's house now to get the letter back before she or her family can accept it." He then hung up. He probably went straight to Susan's house to wait for the postman at the front door. I knew it would be futile because the letter was sent as registered mail to Susan only. Even if he waited for the postman, he couldn't receive it. A few hours later, a dispirited John called me. According to him, there was an incident when the postman arrived. "Finally, I'll take that envelope." "Who are you? You don't live here, right?" "I'm practically a resident here since I'm married. I have the right to receive the mail." "I see, but I can't give you this envelope. It's registered mail for Susan only." "What? Give it to me." "Absolutely not. If you're so eager, ask Susan for permission." What's going on here? Oh, John, what's all this noise? What's happening? Ah, Susan, this is registered mail for you. This man insisted on taking it. Sorry for the disturbance. Now I'll be on my way. What's this? A demand for reparation. John, you are married. What's going on here? Sorry, it's just, she's an ex-wife from a long time ago. I was embarrassed to say I'm divorced. I'm sorry for keeping it secret. But it's strange, isn't it? We haven't been dating long, and a demand for reparation? If you were divorced before we started dating, there shouldn't be any problem, right? Well, my ex-wife is crazy. Maybe she's demanding reparation out of spite because I got married. That was the excuse he gave, but such a lie was quickly exposed. The envelope included a letter I wrote along with my contact information, so Susan called me directly. In that call, I told her about the affair, the invalid divorce, and that they had a wedding ceremony while he was still married to me. Although they had a wedding ceremony, they hadn't submitted the marriage registration yet. John wanted to submit it on April Fool's Day, so it was still pending. He probably delayed submitting the marriage registration due to uncertainty about whether the divorce was finalized. After being exposed, John fled from Susan's house and shamelessly contacted me again. I still had something to tell him, so we agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. As soon as I arrived, John said, "Karen, please withdraw the reparation claim. Let's pretend we've been separated for a long time and officially divorced now. I can apologize to Susan for being secretly divorced and maybe cover it up. You think I'm desperate to stay married to you. I was going to file for divorce anyway, but since you cheated, you'll pay reparation. Just trying to extort money from me, huh? Typical of the poor. You have such a poor heart. You're talking nonsense. Depending on my answer, everything can change. There's still an option where we don't divorce. If I say no, you can't reject it, meaning you can't marry Susan, and your marital status will be exposed. Fine, I'll pay the reparation. Just divorce me now. Sign here." Then, about property division. Property division? How much more do you want to take from me? Reparation should be enough. Remember, we agreed to waive property division, right? So let's make it official. All right. You're not as bad as I thought. Thank you. We then went to a public notary, made a public document for reparation and property division, and then to the city hall to submit the divorce papers, finalizing our divorce. Relieved, I exchanged final words with John. Glad we don't have to divide property. What are you saying? I'm the one who benefits from that. By the way, do you even have assets after paying me reparation? Susan will also claim damages. She mentioned charging you for the wedding expenses. That's impossible. I'm marrying Susan. She can't claim that. We're divorced now, so there should be no problem. Still living in a fantasy. You committed marriage fraud. You had a wedding while still married. You think Susan still believes you? Marriage fraud? That's ridiculous. Susan will believe me. Believe that if you want. I heard from Susan directly. Also, weren't the guests at your wedding paid actors? You still owe them. You knew about that. I haven't paid them yet. What does it matter to you? You could have just taken property division and been better off. That's what I wanted to tell you. Even if we had divided property, you would have benefited more. What are you talking about, poor woman? Your family is poor, and you only make $15,000 a year, right? Even if you got a raise, it would be barely $20,000. You don't have any property. You keep calling me poor, so I thought you might be mistaken. Yes, my salary is indeed $15,000. But you know I work for a foreign company, right? It seems you have no interest in me, but I became a director of the American branch. It's not $115,000 per year, but per month. $155,000 per month. So that's an annual income of $1.8 million. You're still bad with numbers. How do you manage to keep a job? It's $180,000 a year. $180,000? That can't be true. Of course, I haven't had the chance to spend such an amount, so I've been saving it for the future. The savings from before our marriage aren't part of the property division, but there's still a considerable amount since our marriage. So I could have received half of that in the property division. You are my destiny after all. I'll get the divorce papers corrected. Are you okay? After all the contempt, you think I'd gladly undo the divorce if you have that much money. You don't need to claim reparation, right? It's just a small amount for you. He who laughs at 1 cent will weep for 1 cent. This reparation is for the mental anguish you caused me. I'd like to claim more honestly, and since we've made it official, make sure to pay it even in installments. I'll be penniless. Also, don't go back to that apartment. Your belongings should have been moved to your parents' house by now. You thought I had few belongings, but that was because I had already moved. Most of them were. Were you that indifferent to me? I can't have so little, so I have to go back to my parents' house. They don't know anything yet, do they? Let me explain. Don't say anything. I've already told them everything. It's only right to explain why we're divorcing. Oh, and your father said, don't ever step over our threshold again, so I have nowhere to go. He collapsed, and I left the cafe. Later, I heard he caused trouble at the police station. Despite my advice, he went back to the apartment. He sat there aimlessly in the empty apartment until the manager called the police, and he was taken away. I'm not sure if it was for obstructing public duties, trespassing, or for the falsified divorce papers. Eventually, his parents took responsibility for him. After talking with me and learning about Susan, they decided that apologizing and paying damages to Susan's family came first. They went to Susan's house to apologize, kneeling in front of her family. They settled everything without pressing charges for marriage fraud, even paying for the wedding expenses. I had expected them to sue, so it was disappointing they didn't. So, I decided to pursue legal action against him for forging the divorce papers. John offered a settlement, but I didn't withdraw the lawsuit. I didn't want him to think everything could be solved with money. I wanted him to be convicted and understand the gravity of his actions, even if it cost time and money. I left everything to my lawyer, so it wasn't too burdensome for me. Even though it took time, John, exposed for his actions and the marriage fraud at his company, couldn't stay there anymore. After being detained by the police and subsequently absent without leave, he was eventually fired. He ended up living at his parents' home, working all day at a relative's construction company. His father took all his earnings, leaving him with no income. I thought his parents wouldn't abandon him, but they were stricter than I expected. They paid my reparation and Susan's compensation, planning to make him work like a horse until he repaid everything. He lived in a shed-like place with no electricity, receiving only $5 per day for food, deducted from his salary. They plan to disown and kick him out once he's repaid everything. A harsh fate after years of hard work. I was offered a position at the head office abroad, so I moved overseas after the divorce was finalized. I worried John might come to me for help or harbor resentment, but moving abroad alleviated those concerns. I thought work would be my partner for a while, but soon I found a new relationship. I'm now dating a foreign executive at our head office, and I'm pregnant with plans to marry soon. I told him everything about my past and my ex-husband, and he's understanding. I'll take maternity leave and plan to return to work later, supported by him. He's enthusiastic about taking paternity leave and co-parenting, showing a different cultural perspective. After being tormented by my ex-husband, I finally feel I'm grasping true happiness and confidence in building the happy family I always dreamed of. Many suffer due to selfish spouses, and while divorce isn't always the right choice, enduring silence isn't a virtue. It's important to know that honest discussions can lead to resolutions, and sometimes divorce is a necessary option,